No, I don't buy it. This is not live. I'm just trying to make it sound like it's live, but welcome to Blender Today Live. Not live, not dead either. It's just offline, traveling on the go, and low budget, as you can see. I'm not traveling with all my gear, but it's been a week since the last episode. Last Monday, I announced the beta is coming, and it came out on Thursday after a few big changes. Some of them were just naming stuff. Some of them were interaction. The biggest one that I didn't mention in the last episode, actually only hinted at it, is the left click select. At some point, I was selecting something on the screen and I say, well, you right click for now on whatever object I was working on. So it's Blender Today Live. I just compiled, I was going through the commit logs on the changes in Blender, and just to see if it's worth making a Blender Today Live. And I actually seen some of the changes that are not only just making Blender 2.80 more stable and also bringing back some features from 2.7, but some of those features are coming back with some special tweaks and adjustments that make it so much better, especially in the viewport. We're going to see them right now. So without further ado, welcome to Blender Today Live, not dead either. Behold, Blender 2.80. Let's start calling it 2.80 because it's 2.8. The whole series is 2.8, but the first release is what we are actually looking at right now. It might even look different in 2.81. Not UI wise, but in general, right? So the first thing you see now, it's a new splash screen from Gleb and 80 Boros that we're abusing so much the artwork from the VFX training. So yeah, left click is a big thing now. You can choose either way from the splash screen. You can also choose what to do with the spacebar, which is another big topic when deciding what to do, what to set as default. So you can set it to search and right click, and that will be pretty much 2.7. I made a video about the 2.80 updates, and I put it up in the Blender channel. I started the video like the guy from the Vsauce, and some of the people down in the comments got the reference. So yes, if you want to know, well, you probably know if you're watching this, about all the big changes in 2.80 in general, like the big picture. So let's go through the nerdy stuff, the things that changed in Thursday and we're testing every day. So these things are mainly on the viewport. The one that I really like is in the viewport, and I'm going to show it right away because it's my favorite. So studio lights, they were kind of weird during the alpha. Studio lights are the options here that you can see: flat, no lighting, studio, and matte caps. Matte caps, we all know them. They're pretty easy to understand. But the studio lights were kind of weird because they were basically HDR images that you could choose from here that you would use in the look dev. These ones that you can use for lighting your scene. And the studio lights were kind of weird because you could choose some of the images there that were built in were actually just the HDR used, but diffused and blurred, and just it wasn't really made for it. The change now is that these are the built-in lights in Blender, and some of the lights setup that was possible in 2.7, it wasn't here yet. What I mean is the OpenGL lights. So if you remember in 2.7, you will see in the system settings, you will see these really weird widgets where you can turn on and off specific lights. You couldn't turn them all off though. You have to have one, and that way you can light your scene, your objects when you're modeling, sculpting, basically your solid view. In 2.8, this wasn't possible. It was only limited to one image. But now it is, and it just got better. So if I add something more interesting here, for example, like a monkey, we'll see that if I'm surprisingly getting adapted to left click select pretty fast. I'm scared. I don't want to be a left click selector, but I'm getting so used to so easily. Anyway, the lighting of these scenes, you can now change in the light section where you can set up your matte caps or your look dev HDRs. If you follow the alpha release, during the alpha, this was called camera HDR and world HDR. We're going to see that in a second. So basically the lights that you see here, they're just built in by like the ones that come with Blender. They're pretty just regular what you'll see. You can enable also specular lighting or disable it and you will see the effect. But if you enter like the edit mode or studio light, you can actually change these things. You can change the color of the lights, you can have it whatever you want. So far pretty similar to 2.7, except that now you have 4 lights instead of only 3. And also it's the main difference is that now you can save it. So when you go in and out of edit studio light, it's just regular, so you can change your images back and forth. But if you want to have more options here in the studio light, you can go and edit them. So you enter studio light, edit studio light, you change the whatever you are, like whatever rocks your boat as a default, and then save it. Once you save it, you can give it a nice name, and once you save it, it will show up here. Now I'm in like the edit mode. So just to preview what I'm editing. So if you disable that, you have it now here on your list. You leave the mouse over, you get the nice name that you gave it. So this is huge because it means that you don't have to just limit to one way of seeing your mesh in the solid mode. So it means that you can have multiple ways of previewing your models, and it's pretty handy because the Workbench now uses these kind of PBR-ish materials, but it's so much faster than actually having a material, a PBR material, like a real one. Some of the settings are complemented in how the materials look in the viewport by new settings in the materials section here of your materials in the viewport display. So far it was only possible to change the color, but now you can also change the metallicness, and also you can change the roughness. So it's not like it's gonna be reflecting things around it, it's just gonna look a bit more metallic, which can be handy for previewing your scene in a very fast way, like solid mode in 2.7, but now in the Workbench style of doing things. And it's so far it's actually been working really well, and there has been lots of improvements in memory, and especially making sure that the Workbench doesn't use as much VRAM or video RAM on your graphics card. So another of my favorite things changed recently is that the shadows now, the shadow option here in the Workbench engine, I will have a sip of, I'm not having a beer, by the way, I'm just having tea today. But I'm shooting everything in one take. I want to make it feel like it's alive, like it's a live stream. So after the off topic, here in the shadows now, you will find a new setting. Besides the fact that the light direction on your on the shadows is now more similar to what you expect from having the studio lights. You can still move it around, and you can also now change a setting that it's called focus, which means it's gonna have a harsh shadow or a more like a more cartoon effect or more soft. So if you see here, for example, this area, this is the it's not the material itself. If I rotate it, you can see it. It's just the shadow focus. So it's just how sharp it's gonna be, and allows for a very nice fun effect, or also just to preview imperfections on your geometry. So it's pretty handy as well. So we got that covered. Now you can also have custom lights. I'm gonna open a bit better file for this. I have a one of the demos that I wanted to show. It's one that has a lot of collections because there have been changes there. So let's open that one. So this file, I have it here set up with a studio light And let's make it a bit more, a bit more extreme. Let's make a more extreme studio light, because I want to show you now that the studio light by default, it follows the camera. So it's sort of like matcaps that you see your object from different, you move your camera around and the light goes with it, which is for previewing the like the modeling of your mesh. It's very handy because then you can see it react to light. So for example, if you're into a very let's make it dramatic lighting like this, for example, and so for example, let's put it all the way here from the top. So you have this Sin City kind of lighting because you're, I don't know, really into it. When you move around, it's gonna change, the shading is gonna change because it's following the camera, right? But if you disable, okay, here, if you enable, sorry, world in the, oh, I didn't save my light. Oh, it's saved. I can edit, save as new Sin City, and I save it here. Now it should be available. It is. Okay, so now I set it up there, and I can change from following the camera to just not follow the camera and just be like a global rotation. So that way, if I make it, I can actually rotate it. Now that I remember, I can just use the rotation from this slider that will rotate it in its own axis. But if I have something a bit more extreme, like for example there, that is completely black, you'll see that I rotate around and the shading doesn't change. So it's very it's copied to the world coordinates instead of local. So this is a very silly example, but if you see it on a when you're actually working on it, when you're previewing your model, how it's going to look, it's very handy, and it's less confusing because before you will have both in the same, like all of the matcaps will have this option. It will be part of the matcap, the studio light itself, but now you can just toggle it on and off for either, for any matcap. So with that covered, let's move on. The the look depth HDRIs are now what you're gonna change if you want to previewing them here in the look depth setting, where you can change the HDRI background and just shuffle it around here. So you see, move it around, and these are the they used to be called world HDRIs, and now they're just look depth HDRIs from here. Next, the let's move into a more general change. Okay, this is a tiny one. Now the user pref, it's also available in the list. It was possible in 2.7, it was here. Then in 2.8 it got removed when we started adding more of these editors, just split them into sections. And now this one is back because it's proven to be very useful. A lot of people in the community being asking for it, and it really helps. If you, for example, are tweaking the theme, and it's so handy just having it down here and just editing your theme or playing with the add-ons, or it's just, I mean, Blender is so flexible, just why removing some of that flexibility. So we just add it back, and it's called user preference, but it should be called preferences now because that's the name of the editor, because it also has general or system preferences. So yeah, that is one of the small changes, but a big one too. The text boxes, yes, they when you add text now, you can have, if you didn't know, you are not familiar with it, the text boxes, sorry, the text objects can have text boxes. So if you enable here from the text boxes panel, add a text box, oh, we already have one by default. So it's kind of confusing that by default it's just size 0. Maybe it should adapt itself to the content first by default. But the thing is, if you give it any size, then you should see in edit mode the size of that box. So say I make it 3 units by 2 units, or this size, like 3 units by 3 units. Now when I start typing, this is what happens in 2.7. Oh, 2.7. But in 2.8, I can also now change the overflow type to be something more useful, for example, to scale to fit. So now when I change the size of this box, the text scales to fit in that box. So that's pretty nice. Pretty nice addition by Dalai Felinto. Thank you, Dalai. Next one. Well, shortcuts, I already mentioned that spacebar is now on playback, but a shortcut that I came back and I'm really happy about it is the it's a combination of 2 operators. One of them is to by the way, if you didn't know, if you're using left click select and you didn't know how to set the 3D cursor, you can do shift right click to set the 3D cursor. So that is that's the way of doing it right now at the moment as I'm making of this video. We're waiting for feedback, by the way. We're open for feedback, not waiting, but open. If you have the 3D cursor shapes, like maybe some were really far and your viewport was really far, in 2.7 there was a shortcut to both reset the 3D cursor and center the view. The shortcut was Shift C, and it still is Shift C. So I don't know if Shift C is the best shortcut. It's very handful to have it right there and handy to have it right there, but it doesn't have anything to do with the C. It looks like copy, right? Like Ctrl C. But yeah, Shift Z. Next, there has been a few upgrades in the grease pencil area section. So one of them is there is a new tool. It's called the arc primitive. Basically, instead of only drawing line, for example, you can also, which by the way, now you can also draw a line diagonally down or to the side, which is pretty handy. And if you can also now, when you're drawing, for example, a shape like a circle, this is very hard to see, by the way, with this color of the viewport. But if you're, okay, this doesn't help much. What about black? Okay, it's just alpha, so it's gonna be hard to see with any viewport color. So the when you're drawing, for example, a shape like a sphere or a cube, sometimes you want the origin of this transformation to be from the center of the object. So if you hold Alt, you will you can draw a circle from the center of the object. So it's pretty handy. So it's a bit more easy to see where it's going to land, and to do like concentric circles is also very handy. The new option, the new tool is called arc. So there's a new primitive that you can just start drawing, and you can hold, for example, Shift to draw half an arc. You can also press F to flip it to the other side, and C as in circle to or close to close the arc. So that's a new little nifty tool for the grease pencil. And in the /grease pencil /annotation section, there has been a request from animators to have the option in the annotations, like when you're, for example, when you're previewing, when you're tweaking animation and you want to start giving notes to your animators, or you just want a smiley on your animator's animation. The the animation tool was basically the grease pencil, but stripped away from all the advanced options. But some of these advanced options are also handy to have when doing annotations. Maybe not like fields or like, it shouldn't be confusing for the user what is a grease pencil object and what is an annotation. So the bare minimum, it was that it's just like what you can do now. You can add colors, you can add like just change the color, placement, and that's it. But there's one feature that was removed that it was a bit too much, and it's also useful when doing annotations for animation, is that onion skinning. So now you can enable it back. It works exactly the same way as it was before. So you can just go to one frame, draw, and then go to another frame and draw, and you will see the transition. So just onion skinning is back, basically with annotation tools. I think that's pretty much it. There is, if you're making add-ons, just a heads up, or if you're viewing the tutorials from previous Blender versions, heads up, the duplies, the way of duplicating things, like for example, if you had a lamp and you want to duplicate it with a cube, you could do duplicate objects. So you select the cube, you go to the object settings, and then you'll have a duplies menu. This is now called instancing. Everything else is the same, so no worries. It's just the naming has changed because it's an actual instance. It's not a duplicate. It's not like a new version. It's just an instance of that. Yeah, for non-native English speakers, it sounds like, okay, it's the same, right? It's a duplicate. No, it's a different thing. So instancing, it's more appropriate. And I would even go ahead and just rename the array to instance, because it also is an instance, kind of. It is an array as well, but it's not an actual copy of it, even though you can apply it. But yeah, what do you guys think? Is the array should be called instance modifier? Maybe? No? I don't know. All right, I think I'm done with all the updates. There is one change I would like to ask you, because there was one change that was a bit controversial, was regarding transformation. And it was so controversial because it's something you do all the time. For example, if you probably are aware that if you choose a transform orientation of your object, for example, I'm going to scale it here up. So if I have my object slightly rotated, and let's set here, and I set my transform orientation, for example, to normal, it means that if I or local to be a bit more clear, if I press G, for example, to move, to translate, I press Z and or Z for Americans, the first axis that it will lock me, it would be the global. That's how it worked in 2.7. Then you press it once again, and it will go to the custom transformation that you set up. So the one that you set here on the user. And there was one change done last week or 2 weeks ago, and it was only there for a day. I think it annoyed a lot of people, but also it makes sense for a lot of other people. So basically, it's that G and then set. The first time it will always, not G and set, but any kind of transformation. The first time you press the axis key, it would always log to the custom one first, and then back to the global. So if you had it set to local, then you press G and then set, and it will go here first, and then once again it will go to the global. So that was kind of it made a bit of noise for everyone. Basically, it's something that you do all the time. So is that something that you will be interested in having it, like by default in the first way you're moving it locking to the custom transform instead of the other one? There was a drawback though, that by default, for example, even if you have it in global, by default, once you press it twice, it will go to local. Like even if it was in global, and that's something from this way of doing things, the one from 2.7. In the newer one, you will lose that ability, so there's a trade-off. Is that something you like or not? Let me know. There is the last thing that I want to show is about regarding the collections, which is why I opened the blend file in the first place, this blend file. So collections now can be toggled their visibility from, it's also per view layer, but you can also now toggle it from the viewport here, from the viewport itself. You will find that whenever you have an object selected, the dot here on the left of the collection name will be highlighted, basically will be like turned on. If you click on that collection name, it will hide all the other, it will toggle the viewport visibility for all the other collections. So if you click on any collections, it's like isolating the whole collection. You can also just press Shift H, sorry, Control H, and it will hide everything in that within that collection. Then you can also click on it to isolate, and you would be able here to hide them from a specific view layer. So if you have another view layer, for example, and I made a new one with the same, basically same setup, I can have them, this one hidden from here, and then in the other one they are going to be visible, so that way you can have it per view layer, and when you're doing compositing it's much more clear how this works. So it's a different way of working, but I think it's much more closer to 2.7, the way you hide layers and hide layers. So I think that's pretty much it. I covered all those changes. There was a meeting today, like every Monday, and there are a few other like improvements that were done, like the toolbar in the node editor. The toolbar is going to be showing up in more editors over time. The node editor, it was basically missing it, but it doesn't have a lot of tools anyway. It had the annotation tool, which is pretty important just to write notes there. And for example, if you go annotate, you can start doing annotations, which is doesn't even draw here for some reason. So, oh, there you go. Annotations are hidden by default. How handy it is to start drawing and not seeing your annotations. Maybe there's something wrong with my file. Anyway, there's not too many tools here, except for the one that is links cut. So basically you can use a tool for cutting links. I think this is just a show off to just see, hey guys, we have tools, but I don't know how handy that is. Instead of just doing control click. Oh, control click is not there by default. Not sure I like this change. Okay, we did discover new things every day. It's because the control will just, no, I think the control should be I don't want to change the tools every time I want to cut a link. So okay, I'm going to investigate this more, and I'm going to get back to you guys in the next week, if there is enough reason to make more videos, which there always is. So just let's just do it. By the way, I was gonna answer questions from the previous video, but I was just going through them, and it would be impossible to answer all of the questions. So let's write the questions for the next video here in this one, and I will try to answer a number of them. I don't know, 20 or I don't know. We'll try my best. So I'm not gonna go through all of them. There was one that it reminded me to add the hash to the builder.blender.org website, and I did. So now you can see the hash number of the build in the buildbot, and you can see this. Why is this useful? Well, because you can see at a glance that, for example, the 2.8 version, it's the same in all 3 platforms. So even though they're built at different times, it's the same hash, the same version, the same last change in that Blender version. So that is useful to know, not only for users but also for developers, just to make sure that everything is there. That it's also in the name, but it's handy to see it there. And that's it. I think I shouldn't be going through all of the questions just too much. There's one that says, I can't wait for the local view to be back. Local view is back. It's back, and it's in the same shortcut. So you can, I think I mentioned that in the last episode, that you can just do, well, slash, I'm on my laptop right now, but you can just go local view, and you have this. And you can also now remove the object from local view. It was an option that was there in 2.7. It's kind of obscure, but if you were inside of a, here, for example, if you were in local view of if you have these 3 objects and you were in local view, here, local view, and you would press M. You can move an object out of local view. It was a bit obscure. I don't think a lot of people knew about this one, but yeah, you could do it. Basically, if you were working in in one of the local views, you could do it pretty easily. And now it's back. So during the first day of the beta, it wasn't there. I think it was added today. That you can press M and it will remove from local view. So what does it mean? It means that when you exit local view, so if you view toggle local view, you can see all the objects again. Okay, I show way too many things for one offline episode. I did all of this in one take. I cannot believe it. So let's go back to business. I hope you like this format. Sorry about the low budget easiness of this thing. I'm using a microphone like this big. My webcam is a Logitech webcam. It's not like a DSLR, but I'm glad I did it at least and didn't push it to the next. Because when I'm back, otherwise when I come back home, I'm gonna have to be reading and make a 5-hour live stream to talk about all the changes that happened in our lovely Blender since then. So 2.8 is out, the beta is out, the bug tracker is open, so feel free to post all the bugs you can find, especially if they are actual bugs. If just a different way of doing things from 2.7, then maybe ask around on the forums if it's really wrong, or maybe it's just a new way of doing things, because that could also happen. Besides that, everything is just go, have fun, share, and hashtag B3D, B2D, or B2.80, no, not a dot. I think a dot's not allowed. 280, B280 or something like that. Let's flood the internet, and I will blow your ears holes with the same song we did. We live every time, because it doesn't mean that because it's not alive we don't have to do it. We can do it. Let's meet again soon. Let's not set a date. Let's just show up. And 3, 2, yes. All right. Thanks for watching. If you made it this far, please let me know what you think of 2.80. It's all you've been waiting for. There's so many things going on that we might get a few more surprises. But yes, go look at it. Ciao. It's your own 3D software. Ciao.